Did you know that at the turn of the 20th century, France controlled the second largest colonial empire in the world, with a significant part of it in Africa? This included territories stretching from Algeria in the north to Madagascar off the southeastern coast and to Senegal in the west. The late 19th century marked the commencement of French colonialism in Africa, a time of expansion and control. This era was characterized by the strategic acquisition of territories, often through military conquest, and the subsequent exploitation of their rich natural resources. From the rubber of Congo to the gold and diamonds of Mali, the economic repercussions for these African countries were profound, often leading to social upheaval and the disruption of local communities. The exploitation of resources and the imposition of French culture marked the beginning of an intense relationship between France and Africa. Fast forward to the mid-20th century, and the winds of change began to blow across the African continent. The seeds of independence movements were sown in the 1950s and 1960s, marking the start of a transformative era. These movements were ignited by a collective desire for self-determination, a yearning for freedom that was echoed across the continent. Influential figures emerged during this time, leading the charge against colonial rule. Among them was Léopold Sédar Senghor of Senegal, a poet, philosopher, and statesman who advocated for a peaceful transition to independence. In Algeria, the struggle was more violent, with the National Liberation Front leading a bloody war against the French that lasted more than 7 years. Events such as the Bandung Conference of 1955 in Indonesia played a crucial role in galvanizing these movements. Here, representatives from 29 governments of Asian and African nations gathered to promote Afro-Asian economic and cultural cooperation and to oppose colonialism. This conference was a clear signal to colonial powers that the tide was turning. By the 1960s, most of French Africa had gained independence, marking a new chapter in their relationship with France. Today, the dynamics between France and Africa are changing, and it seems France is struggling to accept this shift. In the present day, the power dynamics between France and Africa are shifting, creating a new geopolitical landscape. This shift is marked by the increasing influence of Russia in Africa, and conversely, the decreasing influence of France. Russia, in recent years, has shown a keen interest in Africa, providing substantial aid and fostering military cooperation. Mali, for instance, received 25,000 tons of humanitarian grain from Moscow. Russian Agriculture Minister Dmitry Patrushev announced that up to 200,000 tons of free wheat would be supplied to 6 African countries. This is a clear indication of Russia's strategic move to strengthen its foothold in Africa. On the other hand, France's influence seems to be on a downward trajectory. French President Emmanuel Macron's policies have not been well received in Africa. His attempts to maintain France's historical ties have been met with resistance and, in some cases, outright rejection. This is exemplified by the ongoing conflict in the Sahel region, where France's efforts to combat terrorism have been largely unsuccessful, further diminishing its standing. France's diminishing influence and Russia's rising prominence signify a shift in the power dynamics between these countries in Africa. This shift is reshaping the relationship between France and its former colonies, challenging France's position and its ability to maintain its influence. As Africa continues to assert its autonomy and form new alliances, France's historical influence appears to be waning. The question now is, can France accept this new reality? As the story of power dynamics in Africa continues to evolve, we cannot ignore the role of another player, China. China has become Africa's largest trading partner and a significant source of foreign direct investment, playing a substantial role in Africa's economic growth. Beijing's investments in Africa have catalyzed infrastructure development, opening up new avenues for economic growth and diversification. China's Belt and Road Initiative, for instance, has seen it invest heavily in Africa's infrastructure, building roads, railways, and ports. These investments have not only facilitated trade but also provided Africa with much-needed infrastructure, a vital component for any developing economy. In comparison to France's diminishing influence and Russia's military cooperation, China's strategy appears to be primarily economic. However, this significant economic presence is also translating into political influence, further complicating the power dynamics in Africa. China's approach has been dubbed as economic diplomacy, where it uses its economic muscle to gain political leverage. This tactic has seen China secure political goodwill and support from African countries. While Russia and France grapple with their changing roles, China's economic influence is steadily growing. reshaping Africa's economic landscape and power dynamics. As China continues to invest and foster economic ties, it is becoming a formidable player in Africa. The question now is, how will this economic influence translate into political power and reshape the power dynamics in Africa? In a significant turning point, the nations of the Sahel have signed a pact to cooperate against threats of armed rebellion or external aggression. This agreement, a milestone in the history of these nations, allows them to unify their efforts to protect their sovereignty and territorial integrity. It marks a clear statement that any aggression against one or more contracted parties will be considered an aggression against all parties involved. This pact represents more than just a defensive strategy. It is a symbol of self-reliance and unity among the Sahel nations. It signifies a shift in power dynamics, as these nations seek to define their own destiny, independent of external influences. As the Sahel nations take a stand against external threats, the question remains, how will this pact influence the power dynamics in Africa and the world at large? Will it challenge the growing influence of global powers like China and Russia? Or will it pave the way for a new era of African self-determination and independence? Only time will reveal the true impact of this historic pact. In the late 19th century, a significant event took place that would shape the future of Africa: the Berlin Conference. The Conference of 1884–85, also known as the Congo Conference, saw European powers gather to carve Africa into territories. This marked the beginning of the scramble for Africa, a period of intense rivalry among these powers, each seeking to establish their dominance over African territories. The decisions made at this conference had far-reaching consequences. Borders were drawn with disregard for local cultures or tribal affiliations, leading to socio-political tensions that still resonate today. This conference set the stage for the colonial rule that would follow, leaving a lasting impact on the continent. This historical context is essential to understanding the current power dynamics in Africa, as it laid the groundwork for the struggles for independence, the shifting alliances, and the external influences we see today. As we examine the present-day alliances and conflicts, the echoes of the Berlin Conference continue to reverberate, reminding us of the complex historical threads that weave together the story of Africa. In a significant development, Burkina Faso is set to sign a nuclear power deal with Russia. This strategic move aims to help Burkina Faso meet its growing energy needs and reduce its dependence on traditional energy sources. With this deal, Russia will provide the necessary technology and expertise to set up a nuclear power plant in Burkina Faso, marking an unprecedented step in the nation's energy sector. This move is seen as another example of Russia's growing influence in Africa, extending beyond military cooperation and into the realm of energy and infrastructure. The deal not only promises to address Burkina Faso's energy challenges, but also symbolizes a deeper collaboration between Africa and Russia, which could redefine the power dynamics in the region. However, this deal also raises questions about the implications for power dynamics in the region and the future of energy in Africa. It brings into focus the increasing reliance of African nations on nuclear power to meet their energy demands and the consequent influence of global powers like Russia in shaping Africa's energy landscape. As Russia continues to extend its influence in Africa through such deals, the question remains, how will this reshape the power dynamics in the continent? Will this lead to an era of greater self-reliance and autonomy for African nations? Or will it simply replace one form of dependency with another? As we continue to witness these shifts, the true impact of these developments will only unfold with time. In a significant move marking Russia's increasing prominence, Moscow has entered a military cooperation agreement with Niger. This agreement is aimed at improving the combat readiness of Nigerian troops in response to the escalating insecurity in the Sahel region. This strategic move is seen as Russia's way to counter the failing French efforts to combat terrorism in the region. It is a clear indication of Russia's commitment to assist Africa in its fight against terrorists, unlike France, who has been struggling for decades with little success. This move has not only solidified Russia's position, but it also underscores the shift in power dynamics, with Russia becoming a more reliable ally for Africa in their fight against terrorism. In addition to the military cooperation, there has been a noticeable trend in African countries' economic interactions with Russia. Statistics show that African countries have been increasingly using the currencies of countries that Russia defines as friendly in their trade relations with Moscow. This is another clear indication of Russia's growing influence and the shift from France to Russia as a key ally and trading partner. As Russia continues to extend its support and cooperation, the question remains, how will France respond to this shift in power dynamics and its diminishing influence in Africa? Russia's involvement in Africa extends beyond military cooperation. It is also about aiding African nations combat the lingering effects of colonialism. As we delve deeper into Russia's engagement with Africa, we must acknowledge Russia's efforts to help African nations overcome the economic and social challenges left by colonial rule. The ghost of colonialism still haunts Africa, manifesting in various forms of economic dependence and social inequality. Russia has been actively supporting African nations in their fight for economic independence and sovereignty. For instance, Russia has been instrumental in supporting the African Continental Free Trade Area, a landmark agreement aimed at boosting intra-African trade, thus promoting economic independence. Furthermore, Russia has initiated several projects aimed at alleviating poverty and promoting development in Africa. Among these initiatives is the Russia-Africa Shared Vision 2030 program, which aims to stimulate economic growth and improve living standards across the continent. Moreover, Russia's commitment to Africa is reflected in its scholarship programs that have enabled thousands of African students to study in Russia, thus contributing to the development of Africa's human capital. As Russia continues to support Africa in its fight against the remnants of colonialism, it is clear that the power dynamics in the continent are shifting. The question now is, how will the rest of the world respond to this shift? Will they follow Russia's lead and support Africa in its quest for economic independence and sovereignty? Or will they continue to cling to the old colonial patterns of economic dominance and exploitation? As we move towards the conclusion of our analysis, we will examine the potential responses from the global community in the next scene. In July 2023, the city of St. Petersburg played host to a significant event in the history of Africa and Russia relations, the Second Russia-Africa Summit. This monumental gathering served as a powerful platform for both parties to engage in in-depth discussions and further reinforce their economic, political, and strategic ties. The summit was not just a diplomatic meetup, but a testament to Russia's unwavering commitment to Africa's development and its pivotal role in the ongoing reshaping of power dynamics across the continent. It was an opportunity for Russia to demonstrate its continued support for Africa's fight against the remnants of colonialism and to reaffirm its commitment to the continent's economic independence and sovereignty. A significant outcome of the summit was the endorsement of various cooperative agreements and the launching of new initiatives aimed at boosting Africa's economic growth and development. It was a clear demonstration of Russia's commitment to being a reliable partner for Africa, one that is dedicated to helping the continent overcome its challenges and realize its full potential. The success of the summit signifies a shift in global attention towards Africa and its potential. It underscores the shifting power dynamics and the growing influence of Russia in Africa. The question now is, how will this impact the future of Africa and its relations with the rest of the world? Will other global powers follow suit and invest in Africa's development? Or will they continue to perpetuate the old patterns of economic dominance and exploitation? As we move towards the conclusion of our analysis, we will explore these potential scenarios in the next scene.